We are actually ready to start the fourth and last panel of the symposium. And without further ado, I do want to invite Professor Yves Blau, Professor of Architecture and Urban Design here at the JSD, to introduce this panel. Yves?
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here, and it has been also an immense learning experience for me outside my field of sort of expertise, let's say. But this session, which is the last one, is somewhat different, I think, from the previous ones, in that it addresses a different scale of intervention. And just to sort of reiterate the brief of this panel, it's how the agency, or what we're concerned with here, is how the agency of design can better engage the national and international bureaucracies that direct these initiatives beyond the purely anecdotal and piecemeal structure permeating such vast undertakings. The way I interpret that is that this session is fundamentally speculative and it's projective. And in particular, something which we've been sort of skirting around a little bit in the last day and a half, we're concerned here with the agency of design. And we're concerned with the agency of design in terms of projects and interventions. But I would also say with design as a way of thinking at multiple scales, and in a way that deals with multiple variables. And so I would characterize design as being a way of thinking that deals with multiple scales and multiple variables, and engages multiple variables. And that this is a way of characterizing that. The other thing is that over the last day and a half, we have seen the impact of large-scale interventions, of infrastructures, and there's been a lot of discussion about what infrastructure is, and how it behaves, and what its purpose is. And certainly, there's no consensus on that, and I don't think that that's anything that we're aiming for here. But we've seen the impact of these large-scale interventions on local environments and local ecologies. And the proposition here, at least as I understand it, is that small-scale interventions can impact the larger scale. And that this session here is about the instrumentality of architecture within all of these larger networks and infrastructures and so on. And I think that there are basically two issues that I see are operating here. One of them is the role of design and design thinking to actually imagine the small-scale implications of large-scale moves. And not only imagine, but imagine is very important here, because it's imagining how to mediate, and that it is the role of architecture and design to mediate between the larger and the smaller scale and to intervene. And so far, we've looked at DISPLACEMENT at that scale, but I think that we're going to look a little bit more at the smaller scale. And the second concern, as I see it, of this session is to consider changing the usual and historical pattern of extraction sites and extraction economies, which the normal pattern has been that profits from extraction go somewhere else, that Standard Oil, helped build New York, for instance. And so the issue, or one of the issues I think that we are considering here, is that rather than having the profits go somewhere else, because this is what we've been talking about with all of this infrastructure, is how to get the stuff from here to there, but actually to channel the resources into the site itself. And how do you do that? And one of the ways to consider is something that maybe we've touched on a little bit too, and that is to diversify the economy so that it's not totally dependent on a single industry or resource extraction industry, let's say. And I think that in this process, and I'm throwing these suggestions out, which we can pick up later, that we can transform the very concept, and I guess I would also question the concept of the hinterland, actually, and that maybe hinterland is a concept that is no longer very useful as we think about all of these relationships between nodes and centers and so on. And that there's a concept or a theory that I just sort of introduce here that was developed in a part of the world that I have studied intensively, certainly more so than South America, and that is Central Europe and Eastern Europe. And this is a concept which is known as the freedom of the periphery. And it's a very interesting concept that peripheral zones are very different from provincial zones, that the periphery is different from the province. In the provincial relationship, there's a very strong pull to a center. In a peripheral situation, there's no strong gravitational pull to any one center, but to lots of different centers. And so there's a kind of freedom in the periphery to draw on all, from all sides and all angles. And that in the process, the periphery or nodes in the periphery can become their own kind of center. So I guess I'd like to just sort of throw that out as a thought for thinking about these issues of hinterland and so forth. And I'm actually going to leave it to our speakers to address those things. And so now I'm going to introduce them, and you'll have to forgive me if I mispronounce things. Our first speaker is Camilo Restrepo, who graduated from the Universidad Pontificia Bolivariana de Medellin this is pathetic, in 1998. He holds a master's in architecture, urbanism, and urban culture from the Universitat Politécnica de Catalunya. And currently, he's a professor in the School of Architecture in the Universidad Pontificia Bolivariana de Medellin. Please welcome Camilo Restrepo.
Thank you very much, Eve, for the presentation. You make it even sound better, the name of the university that is in reality. It's hard to put together in the same surface the Pope and Bolivar, so it's... Well, thank you very much, Felipe, Anna, and Victor, for this kind invitation. I never thought that a book I read 2 years ago will take me to be here talking to you right now. The book, it's a book written by Wade Davis. It's an ethnobotanic, also a student here from Harvard. And the title of the book, it's called One River, Exploration and Discoveries in the Amazon Rainforest, which in a way explains and let us know all the adventures of Richard Evan Schultes, which was the director of the ethnobotany department here in Harvard, from the 40s almost until his death. And he made an astonishing work recollecting and putting the biodiversity into the map. So I will introduce this by saying also that in this case we see that architecture can be a very useful tool, and architecture should be as witty as these kind of intelligent weapons that find a target and make it explode in million pieces that will create and give us opportunities to work and develop different conditions. The frame that I want to create for this is that I'm going to speak and present you the topic of health as infrastructure related directly to the condition of the forest, the rainforest, as a supply, as a resource that doesn't have to be taken out to produce the effect, which is absolutely opposite from mining. The frame, I will introduce it as the Amazon area and the Latin American rainforest, understood as a transnational pharmaceutical park, can be a new and witty approach for IIRSA initiative and to the conservation and cultural preservation of this region and its eco-social sustainability. A subtle relation of architecture with sciences through a new gaze such as ethnobotanic frame can bring new possibilities for key actions to protect and keep the Latin American forest and to insert new aesthetics and performative issues to architecture, landscape, design and its practice. The benefits of this biochemical mining as pharma park are social, historical, ecological, and economical. We will travel in this lecture from race to conservation, and we will be touching different issues such as mining, mineral mining to be more precise, and I will make the differentiation in a while, illegal biochemical mining, and biochemical issues that are presented thanks to ethnobotanics, and landscape ecosystem to create a complete surface that interlap and multi-layered scales that will bring us to the creation of a pharma park. In Colombia, the idea of mining has created a huge transformation of landscape and society. In the 19th century, when we were having this fight with to get independence from Spain, Bolivar negotiated with the Brits that once they gave them the money, and after the independence, Bolivar will give them the possibility to have access to all the gold mines. That created a very strange mentality in our society, and that has meant that it's a mentality of extraction but no infrastructure, because you don't know where or when the gold mines are going to disappear, so it's not worth it for the investors to put money into society or into the landscape. This lack of social investment has derived in smuggling drugs, and paradoxically, in this also negative size, the routes that were used during the 19th at the beginning of the 20th century are exactly the same routes that are used nowadays to smuggle drug to be exported. So that means that mining gold and mining in the chemical aspect of producing an illegal substance with a chemical potential of transforming a society and make it become a health issue has exactly the same geographical roots. And the cultural roots depend also almost as over if it was in the same surface. But in the other way, this also generated a positive situation, which is that due to the lack of infrastructure, Colombia has focused itself to get industrialized process. And during the privatizations of the 90s, Colombia didn't suffer as much as Chile or Peru, creating a very strong economy based mainly in in services and providing different and alternative energy resources. So this is the projection for the mineral growth in Latin America over the last 5 years, and they are intended to be the double of what it was between 2000 and 2005. It's expected to be growing at around 200% more than what we see here. And we see that Colombia is not even in the chart because due to guerrilla and the internal conflict, Colombia was not in the map. And in a way, we are not in the map because we are trapped between the Andes Mountains, the forest, and the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean. So for me, it's absolutely jealous how in the south they get together between Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and Brazil. But we live in the corner of the world and away from almost everything. This is somehow the way that the society that got created by the extraction of mining. You see, it creates a strong difference between who takes the resource and who gets the money for it. This is located in El Chocó. It's near the Pacific coast, the poorest region of income in Colombia, but one of the richest in the world of biodiversity and minerals. At the same time, this kind of situation has created social displacement. All this kind of infrastructure mining has created displacement and refugees that are quite strong. For example, there is a projection for a dam that when they counted how many people were living there 2 years ago, it was 2,000 inhabitants. Nowadays, they are 12,000 inhabitants. So somebody, it's smuggling people in a way to put them to work together and ask for money. So any state that has this kind of situation doubts 1 or 2 times to really put the money building infrastructure. So due to these kind of conditions, all these traditional knowledges and the loss of traditional knowledge has become a constant matter in these situations. If you take a look at mining, it happens because people are taken from one region to the other to put pressure on the price of the land. If you think about oil, then these people has to move. And if you think about drug dealing or planting and having coca labs, it's because they have to be part of it or against them. So they become a target for the state, for the paramilitary groups, for the guerrilla, and for society. This is somehow the landscape that it's created because of these interventions. This is also in El Chocó. And the idea of landscape through mining somehow has led us in the last years to develop a very strange relation with landscape, because somehow as architects and landscape designers, sometimes we love the post-industrial nostalgia. But that's not an issue to play with, especially when you're talking about resources and societies that depend upon these kind of situations. The other issue that I want to talk about here, it's the mineral, what happens with the frontier in the forest. When this kind of a deadly frontier begins to push and put some pressure over the land, people have to flee and go away of these places, living beside them, or living their resources, such as having the ability to develop medicines of what the land brings them. You see, the ecosystems in the rainforest are very, very subtle and very fragile because they are interrelated in a very strong way that poison or ants or the food that these animals eat are the ones that are able to create these kind of substances that later can be synthesized into anesthesia or some other drugs that I will speak about later. Not even the most radical rainbow warriors, as it was called in the Greenpeace movement at the 80s, had made something really strong to stop this kind of relation with the Amazon or the rainforest. You see here a singer walking with one of these gurus or these shamans, I don't know what's the name, but walking, trying to make some propaganda to save the rainforest. But I believe that we've been doing it wrongly because we are not linking rainforest with the issues that really matter to us as human beings. And one of them will be the health. We always think about the Amazon as something that happens somewhere, but we don't know where it is, or we don't even know what rainforest is, because it happens somewhere in the middle, in the tropical belt. This has made all this frontier to change rapidly, but with changes that somehow are irreversible, but somehow nature sometimes can be forced to go the other way around, to create a kind of a reversal process if the right tools are used, instead of creating this kind of eco-social gap, because the relation of these populations with the place they live in, it's so direct that once they are taken away of this place, they don't know what to do. Somehow this is a kind of a chart that shows us how this frontier is changing in the Brazilian Amazon. And this takes me to a point that all the information that we can find, or most of it, is mainly from Brazil, because Brazil somehow has been into the map for many years, and people are worried about what happens to Brazil, because being a stronger economy appears more in the news, we could say. But places like Colombia, nobody does care about that, because we live somewhere else in the corner of Latin America, and we don't produce knowledge. So since we don't produce knowledge, we don't produce books, we don't do research. So everything keeps, or at least it's being kept under a desk of a guy that works for the government, or the universities keep them because they don't have the money to make it circulate. This is somehow the agricultural frontier, how it moves from Brazil to the north. And this is somehow the projection for 2050. But I know I'm creating a kind of a tragic scenario, but if I don't do this, what I'm going to tell you later doesn't appear that interesting. No, I'm joking, but this is the situation. The illegal condition of Colombia somehow has two different sides of the same coin, which is on one side has prevailed or has prevented the destruction of the forest due to the guerrilla that it's in the forest. So that has made that nobody wants to go there. No oil companies, no mining companies. Nobody will like to get kidnapped, and we have quite a history about kidnapping. So this has become like a part that it's protected due to fear, like a kind of a fearscape. This biochemical condition has also transformed our landscape. We have seen that these little airplanes that are putting glyphosate, I don't know, glyfosato, it's the name in Spanish. It's this kind of substance that gets spread over the forest to kill the coca leaves. But at the same time, this kind of this substance moves to the forest, killing the biodiversity. So we are moving from the chemical brothers to the chemical robbers, because this kind of situation creates that all this leaking, it creates a kind of a leak in the economy, creating a huge gap between the guy that plants the coca leaf and the one that sells it here in the United States or Europe or places where are consumed. More than 1,000. The index of variation of the price rises 1,000 every time it's moved from one place of the chain to the other one. But this has created a distortion in the way we see landscape in Colombia. This is a very famous painting from the beginning of the 20th century by Francisco Cano called Horizons, which was somehow this colonization of the south of the country that meant really that these people were going to work tearing down the forest or working for the mines. But then also another artist, Carlos Uribe, did this kind of installation, this kind of a change in the landscape by putting the plane here also with the glypho something thing, substance, spreading it over the landscape. And this has taken also this guy, Carlos Uribe, to make a terrible and very ingenious relation with this kind of a situation, which is Pablo Escobar showing new horizons. Where do you have to go to sell the biochemical products? But the same instrument that has fed the nature to produce such chemically rich substances has another side, which is the biochemical condition. And before going into that, I would like to go a little bit into something that I think that it's a key to understand how science and architecture can become two sides of a coin, from an endangered black box landscape to a performative landscape that will give us some tools to design and to find ways of develop these kind of projects. You see that the visuality, I mean, the culture of landscape has always been related to visuality, so to what we see and how things, or what things represent in space. We have moved from the camera obscura to photography, such as the work of David Hockney and all the experiments he created during the 60s, 70s, and all the experiments he does now, going from digital cameras and digital technologies, even to be drawing the landscape in an iPad. But this has created always a relation of distance, of being here and there, us and them. Landscape as a black surface that happens behind us, far away. But this kind of all this kind of idea of what happens there has also taken us into the idea and the situation that landscape is a surface where things happen, but visually speaking. This is a very strange painting also that puts together these kind of situations of new horizons, all this idea. And it's a painting of Bolivar riding his horse through the Amazon River, which actually he never was there. But putting this kind of heroic situation of how someone can be in the horizon, showing the way to a country to go somewhere else. And this links all the representations we have made of the Amazon basin and the rainforest as something that it's into the romantic tradition of landscape, very distant. You see the size of nature and the size of the humans that are here. So it's like an overwhelming condition of nature that happens above all of us, creating and increasing also this situation of somehow the picturesque in a way. But this situation can change and can be seen in a different way through the gaze that is proposed by ethnobotany, which it's somehow I will read a little bit here, so you can understand it differently, and I can put the idea a little bit farther in. Science and architecture has joined forces for almost 500 years, but they come together and meet when they both contribute to a cultural construction of perception. They have worked together in the construction of a similar surface of visuality as described by Anton Picon in his text, Architecture, Science, Technology, and the Virtual Realm. To quote, I will say that to shape and reshape the categories of visual perception, end quote. Nowadays, in society, shift of realm from a mechanical to thermochemical order, architecture plays a key role for redefining economical, social opportunities. In its ability to perform anticipatory practices for new dynamics and to characterize and visualize spatial relations as a constant controversy for the use, production, and management of space. A subtle relation of architecture with sciences through a new gaze, such as an ethnobotanic frame, can bring new possibilities for key actions to protect and keep the Latin American rainforest, as well as to insert new aesthetics and performative issues to architecture and its practice. This means that if we take into account the work of Richard Evans Schultes, this guy that I was telling you at the beginning, we see that ethnobotany in Latin America, as described and performed by Richard Evans Schultes and his students at Harvard, Wade Davis and Tim Plowman, can change our perception of nature and the long-lasting idea of science and architecture as a scope frame that makes emphasis on the visual. This figurative optical frame mentioned by Picon diminishes due to the performative approach that ethnobotanic gives to landscape and nature, where nature is not as important for its appearance as for its capacities. In other words, nature, with all its power, content, and overshadowing its physicality, becomes performative rather than representative, pointing out a new perspective for architecture, landscape design, and aesthetic values. An ethnobotanic approach to nature used by architecture can create a new possibility of intervention in the Amazon territory and Latin American rainforest, with all the IIRSA interests and objectives as for the redescribing and updating architecture values in its practice. A new possibility for the Latin American rainforest to get a second nature, and a possibility for developing a sustainable approach to rainforest through a redescription of values to become public, determined, and significant assembly for the contemporary collective is in the hands of innovative approach such as resource extraction urbanism. Through this kind of approach, nature gets visible and reassembled and unblack-boxed under the scope of performative landscape through the design of a pharma park in the hinterlands of the Latin American territory. This is the routes that Evan Schultes did while he traveled in Latin America between 1941 and 1953. I'm not very good at multitasking, so I have to move this. No, this? Oh, okay, this is the red one. You're right. Yeah, thank you. One of the substances he found out was the Banisteriopsis capi, also known as ayahuasca or yahe. It's called the soul vine. And it's used by different tribes going from Colombia to Ecuador or to Brazil. And they extract this substance to have visions of the future. It's like a kind of a drug that allows them also to see what's going on with society and to have a clear view of reality. This Banisteriopsis capsi, this is the plant in its atmosphere, and this is exactly the part of the plant that they take out. So this has created also this kind of art, and this is a painting by a Colombian painter called Juan Carlos Jacanamijoy. He's an indigenous guy from indigenous, right? Thank you. Indigenous guy from Putumayo in the border with Ecuador, and he performs this kind of art that relates directly with the notion that Evan Schultes pointed out when he was writing about Jahe, saying that he could only see colors when he took Jahe. They also mix that with this trunk of this tree and create this kind of celebrations to create and put away all the spirits. But if we take away this kind of let's say, strictly ethnobotanic gaze to the situation, we see that this is a lab. This is a lab in the middle of the rainforest. And if we are able to create this kind of labs, I'm not saying materially speaking, but you see how they occupy land. It's very subtle. And this brings to my mind this famous movie from the 80s with Sean Connery that's called Medicine Man, which is inspired in these kind of situations. So you see that it creates a very sustainable, very little, very elegant, in a way, use of using space. And you can see, in a way, that this plant, if it's, I'm talking about this kind of situation when you have a lab available near to the resource, to the raw material, you will see that there is this kind of a substance. It's called curare. And they extract curare, the Indians, the indigenous tribes, extract curare to produce a kind of a poison. This substance was isolated in 1939, and since then they created the ditubocurarin, which is a substance that is used in anesthesiology, which is a muscle relaxant, that every time that we get a surgery nowadays, they use this substance. So we are all linked to the rainforest. Also, at the same time, this substance, it's called borrachero, or drunkard, or angel's trumpet, I believe it's the name in English. It's also used to produce scopolamine. Scopolamine, it's a substance that if it's used illegally, they blow it into your face, making a kind of a short circuit between your nervous system and your brain, creating that you lose your will. But at the other day, or according to the dose you get, you don't remember anything. But this scopolamine, it's also linked in a legal way to a substance that we use very often. Every time we have a stomach ache, a stomach pain, we consume butylscopolamine, which comes in a drug that it's called Buscapina, Buscopan, and it's produced by Boehringer Ingelheim. So you see it's taken out from Bruchmansia candida, and you see how all these substances we have to take day by day according to our health are all linked to the Amazon, the rainforest. To end now, the pharma park, it's more an idea of how can we create a process of putting all these pieces together, of how to put the pieces together. These are the main pharmaceutical houses in the world. This is the top 10 that goes from Johnson & Johnson to Bayer. And how the map, that has no north, actually, speaking about maps, the last 2 days, using the Buckminster-Fuller map, this situation that this is the people that know how to produce the, let's say, the legal medicine that runs with all the certificates of health, clean process. But all the extraction happens here without anybody noticing it, because to take away just a plant, it's very easy. It's not as easy, it's not as difficult as taking out a gold mine or oil. So this frame helps us understand that this is, sorry. Oop. Yeah. I know I'm doing something wrong. Nah, okay, yeah. Well, this is IIRSA. This is IIRSA, what is left of IIRSA, because we've taken out all the places that have no nodes, that are not working into the system. Colombia is here, Brazil is here, Argentina is here, and I'm keeping the same direction of the map used by Buckminster Fuller. So if we take a look at this map and relate it with this kind of situation, you will see that all that orange spots are indigenous tribes living and relating with IIRSA. But if we take a look at it, and we don't think only as indigenous tribes, and we think at pharmacies, we see a great potential of medicine and different products that we don't even know. This is the Amazonic node established by IIRSA and all the pharmacies that are around. This is the tribes and the territory, so the knowledge is there. You cannot take it out. This is some of the roads. And we have been talking about this today, so I'm not going to go further in it. This is the parks, the national parks, and the places that are officially established as reservoirs. And this is something that it's very interesting, because you see that we've been talking about these days a lot about the south, but all this area here, it's rainforest. Also, all these, and last week it was in the news came a very something that made me really worry about it, and it was an announcement that the Amazon territory in Colombia occupies 45% of our land, and it only gives 1% to the GPD. This means that now the Amazon, it's available for exploitation. These are the rivers, and this takes me to 3 points that I'm gonna end right now. Don't get bored. I'm about to finish. First, it's 3 ideas that will bring this. The intervention can be made through 3 principles: biochemical mining, lab ports, as if every river was a highway, the periphery at the jungle as a productive defensive control wall, and every inhabitant is a scientific pharma park ranger. These are the structure of the rivers. This is the area of the surface we're talking about. If we speak mainly about the Amazon basin, this is some 121 prescription drugs come from plant-derived resources. 25% of Western pharmaceutical are derived from rainforest ingredients. 1% trees and plants have been only tested. This means that it's a knowledge that it's getting loose or getting lost due to the relation we have with the people that live there actually, and a lot of information is getting lost. This means, and the proposal goes like this in a way, is that if we take only one, the net profit of the pharmaceutical houses are around $70,000 million per year. The sales are $500,000 million, and 15% of that great amount of money is used in research and development. That means $75,000 million. If we compare that number with the income of an inhabitant in the Amazon, which are 21 million, which is almost $400 a year, and if we invest or we put only 10% of that research and development money to be put into the rainforest, we can increase their income by double and make them an active part of global health. This means that this kind of a situation will allow us to understand the territory as something that can be every river as a highway, which means that second, I have the paper here. I'm about to finish. Oh, it's here. This means that the lab ports is making use of the well-permeated and multiple hydric network. We consider very important to assume that in some areas, lab ports can be deployed as a respectful facility for investigation, herborization, and reception of selected plants. There, knowledge can be shared among natives and scientists as well to become a contact point with the productive protective network. These facilities should work for educational and scientific purposes. The greenhouse reforestation belt. At the same time, a peripheral or network belt or greenhouses located every 60 kilometers in the border of the Amazon forest is needed with three purposes. One, to mark and defend the Amazon interior with a scientific facilities barrier wall defining a border. Two, for planting the selected species, making use of the land that already has been devastated, but that has the same temperature, soil, nature conditions. To plant and reforest the jungle through the plantation of different endemic plants with medicinal values and as a supply for further demands of the approved species. This is not a monoculture, a monocrop thing. Three, educational and control infrastructures for the preservation, attention, and development of the Amazon basin and its surroundings. And fourth, to make the jungle border grow. It means to reforestate the border, to make the jungle grow and recuperate its dimension instead of shrinking as it does right now. And just to finish, to make the native agents as pharma park rangers, to find and locate plants with biomedical capacities is a clean process that can be made by natives, helping them increase their income and socioeconomical status, to keep the knowledge. And the main source of this information is rooted in the traditional inhabitants of the jungle, in a strong cooperation within them. Once a plant is located, it can be sent to the pharmaceutical and botanic gardens to be analyzed. If the plant is approved for medical development, small greenhouses conceived as port labs can be established inside the jungle to herborize, with the guarantee that no extraction or modification of its ecosystem is made. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. Our next speaker is Solano Benitez, who graduated from the Faculty of Architecture at the National University of Asunción in 1986. He was awarded the National Prize for Architecture in 1999 by the College of Paraguayan Architects. And he founded the Gabinete de Arquitectura, a professional architectural studio, which he currently shares with his partners, Alberto Marinoni and Gloria Cabral. Please welcome Solano Benitez.
Thank you very much. I want to speak in Slowlish, a mix between English and slow, like a language. Sorry, I was studying English many years ago for 3 months, and for that my vocabulary is not very developed. But if you try to explain your capacity, this language could have a poetical sense. It's not very good for this presentation, but for the round table it's optimist, because open path. And first of all, many thanks. Felipe, Ana Maria, Felipe, many thanks. Ana Maria, thanks. It's a gift to be here. And I'm now with the sponsor of others institutions. My son Solanito represents my family institution. Thank you for being here. And my dean, Ricardo Meyer, is the dean of my university. Thank you for being here and for. I don't have many words. Sorry. The idea of this presentation runs around the spinning world. How can the situations can run and can transform everything? The first spinning machine who transformed everything is not the spinning to be skinny and tonified and whatever. The very important spinning machine was this, the spinning jenny. The spinning jenny was the first machine. The men made it more or less 250 years ago and transformed absolutely everything when we cross from this kind of work to produce 8 whales of, no sé cómo se dice, hilos. Tú tienes que tener un micro. No, no se escuchó.
Threads.
Threads.
There we go.
Okay. And amplify the capacity of produce the human beings. After of this machine appeared the spinning mule machine, who use hydraulic energy for produce and more and more. And when this condition start, the revolution, the industrial revolution moment in the history, and from this moment everything changed. Because even using a very primitive spinning machine, this is not a recapitulation. This is this is how can the human spirit can be amplified. Sorry, you need. It's not this. No. Ahí. Okay. More and more difficult. Well, during almost a quarter of millennium, 250 years, around the idea of production, the human beings, we produce only 2 ideas about how can we be in the world. No sé si lo dije bien. The first of this idea made it by Adam Smith, about when he looked the capacity of the human beings to transform and produce, they made his manifestum, Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nation. And for first time, imagine the possibility of the riqueza, ¿cómo sería? The wealth, sorry. The possibility of the wealth is connected with the capacity of production, the specialism of and the division of the work, and many, many changes appear and start the idea of the capital is a very important thing to the life of the people. Au contraire, it's clear. Can I speak in where I need to? Au contraire, in the other hand, Karl Marx made his book, his manifesto, The Capitalist, and talk about the important, how the people is important to produce, and put all his reflexiones, ¿cómo se diría? All his reflection around even with the idea of production, but we, the people, the workers, are now the important. But we, during this quarter of millennium, we assist at this kind of war between capitalism and socialism. The third idea we can make was the nationalism. Sometimes go to the left, sometimes go to the right. But we only made three ideas during 250 years. And these simple ideas were warring, peleándose, war. Usen el micrófono, si no nadie les entiende.
Tell you and you tell the rest.
No.
At war.
Okay.
Fighting.
And transform everything. After of this moment, we are the Homo faber. When we was an Homo faber, we received an incredible shot of adrenaline when we imagine the possibility of developing everything. And with this idea, we share with the other people and communicate, now we have another possibility to do. And this shock, similar of the shock who have the artists or the scientists, was the gratification of this act of favor. But we changed with the Industrial Revolution. We changed this concept, and we transformed the Homo faber to the Homo laborans. The Homo laborans, very interesting pieces for the process of production, live a very boring life. Like a human laborance, I can turn a screw forever, because I change the possibility of transform things and use my brain and whatever to turn a screw, a single screw, every time, forever. For do that, I need a compensation. The compensation is a salary. The salary can make me the possibility of a gratification in the consume moment. And I can make everything. I can repeat systematically a teaching classes for a small salary. If I can go to Rio de Janeiro to the Carnival when I have many money for do this. These transformations comes to now a very, very difficult moment, because in this moment the human beings to produce are not necessary. To produce everything, a single machine is more efficient than the human beings. Every single robot can substitute many workers, and for that the humans don't have more activity to do in the world. We sobramos. Usa el micrófono. Okay.
We are excess.
We are excess, okay. In the voices of Nicanor Parra, I don't know how can say this in English, but in Spanish it's very common phrase, el pueblo unido jamás será vencido. In English, more or less, the people united will never be defeated. It's not more, no, it's not very good. But Nicanor Parra say, la derecha y la izquierda unidas jamás serán vencidas.
The right and the left united shall never be defeated.
That's the concept. And that's for what? Because to produce the human beings are not necessary. I am the industrial guy. And to make this glass, I know you are the government agent. And to produce this, I accept, give to you some quantity of money, and you, like a government agent, you can share this money to the rest of the people to buy this, finally, this glass. But nobody have nothing to do. For make this is not necessarily the people. And this horrible moment testified with the violence in the city and the problems of the people in the industrial countries, and because nobody have nothing to do. And the same kind of conflicts appear in our countries. For example, the war between the traditional farmers and indigenous people against the industrial agriculture, who made an incredible quantity of soy plantations. And for the industrial guys, the poor people, the traditional farmers, and the indigenous people they are very lazy. They are very lazy. Because if they can cooperativize, this is a new word in cooperativizarse, ¿cómo sería? If they create a cooperative, a co-op, they can buy a truck, a very important tractor, and can produce many quantity of soy. In the other side of the border of this war, for the indigenous and for the traditional farmers, the industrial agricultural are killers. There are assassins, because destroying the forest, destroying the water, destroying the earth, destroying everything, the biodiversity and everything. And this conflict is testified this terrible, horrible moment. But in Paraguay, we have a different condition. Some guys, farmers and indigenous, come to our office to explain out some things. There are in a place named Ubirarobana. Ubirarobana is a place who is here, near from the border to Brazil. And in this particular place here, they live in approximately 20,000 hectares 2,000 families. They they was occupied, o ellos, eso, an extension of land after the revolution process who left the dictatorship Alfredo Stroessner in 1989. And here, this is the Acuífero Guaraní, the most important reserve of the water in the world, and is here. The local is here. And this is the process of this deforestation of my country between 1945 and 2008. And here, and here is Ibiraroana. When these people arrive to this land, they to resist and for have a better life, they have some singular idea. They rebuild the forest because everyone have 10 hectares in the partition of the land, and with 1 hectare can have production to eat, to survive. And the other 8 hectares, the other 9 hectares, they thinking about the possibility to eat, ¿cómo se dice eso? Variado, to eat in a diversified way, to have many opportunity to keep plants to the maintenance of the health. And if they rebuild the forest, all these opportunities appear. And the society, the people who live there, going better and better and start a new condition of over this territory. This is the border between the soy plantation and the acuífero. The particular case of Ibiraroana is this space. Está al lado, es vecino. It's neighboring with a reserve, La Reserva del Maracayú, who have 1,600 hectares. When we arrive to this particular local, for us appear an incredible situation, because in a single war, nobody can win. And the problem is, if these conditions continues in the time, we don't have possibility to have a society or a condition to grow and to have a good life and wherever. To these people, in the voices of our new philosopher like Sloterdijk, the minimum human condition is 2. The human condition starts when I finally know I am at minimum one other. Less of 2, I am a monkey. I'm hominid process. When I understand I am the other, start the process of the human being. And my humanity grow and grow if I feel I am all the people. And to do that, how can the people finally search and have an opportunity for the life. And this opportunity appeared in this particular moment after the rebuilding the forest, because in a border of the war, the agricultural industrial produce soil, seed for the world, for all the people, etc. But in the old, this is a commodity to have a number in every market of the world. But in the other side of the frontier, the farmers, los campesinos, los indígenas, they produce another kind of commodity. Aire de calidad, agua de calidad, sostenimiento de la biodiversidad, y desaparece la guerra. Porque los modos, because the way of production, okay, because the way of production don't fight more again, because both are necessary. If I rebuild, when I rebuild the forest, the process of rebuild the forest demands enormous quantity of hours of workers in a several position to work like Felipe here, because they need to watch what the ants do, and the bird like this worm, and this worm like this plant, and to grow the forest need an enormous quantity of occupation to bring together all the best conditions to develop the possibility of the forest. And stop the war, because for produce 20,000 hectares of soil, we need some single tractor, only work a single people. But to rebuild the forest, we need many, many people with all his ancient knowledge and with his capacity to imagine how can bring together the better condition for live to the next generation, better condition to the air, for the water, for the biodiversity, etc., etc. And this is an amazing moment, because for us, we came from a country without industrial process. And for that, we have many, many people. But these people know exactly what is near from his house, where is his drug, where is his food, where is his water, etc., etc. And to develop this idea, our compromise with nosotros comprometimos con otras facultades. Vení, porque vamos a hacerlo más rápido. Claro, entonces y tú lo traduces al mismo tiempo. Claro. Peor es para mí que no sé hablar inglés.
Dale. Okay. You guys can hear me, okay.
Bueno, and we start a process to
analyze.
Bueno, with the compromise of the different faculties from all South America, for example, the Escola da Cidade de São Paulo, even the FAUSP, when I stay with you some days, thank you very much for that, and with the UBA, University of Buenos Aires, and the magister course, and even for the Taller E y Juan Carlos y toda la gente, y también with Uruguay, we developed many projects and involve students in the process to think how can now, with this possibility of rebuild the forest, how can now imagine a new condition, a new urban condition to allow the possibility of the people living inside of the forest. Okay, ¿se entendió eso? Yeah. Okay. Even with this particular this particular work was made by Julia and Andrea from the Venetian Institute of Architecture. And we combined the privilege to be in contact for many faculties to analyze the possibility to imagine projects here. This is Julia living with the farmers and indigenous for many times. This is plains of where the water appear. Eso. Nacientes. Nacientes. Y cómo podemos imaginar posibilidad de infraestructura to develop in this sense. The water column, tank, ¿será? Yeah. The water column, sí. A roof for seeds. ¿Cómo se dice eso? A roof for? Seeds. Yeah, para a seed bolt. And many others schemes to develop the possibility of how the city can be sustainable, and in how many ways to the people live in places like this. For example, this was in the Escola da Cidade in São Paulo. Imagine asentamientos. And how can these particular works imagine the possibility, how can we have relations, works, plantation, forest, all in the same space? Or for example, this imagine an ancient primitive asentamiento, Tecoja Guarani, and imagine the possibility of develop this concept and adapt to the forest, to the new forest here, and imagine how can this particular aldea, this aldea, village, can be in contact with the all the world, because they made air for the world. They made water for the world. They sustain the possibility of the biodiversity for the world. And how can have a compromise between Uiraroana and the rest of the world? For example, imagine 2 days in March 2, the people live for 2 days in the street to to wait the moment to buy the iPad. And this look, how is happiness? How because have two. Can buy two. But in the same process, we can imagine, we can imagine the possibility to here announce a possibility start to the process of Uiraroana adapted to our particular geometry and geography, and growing and growing and growing and growing and growing the process, the idea of the people living, working, and sustain the possibility of the return of the human being condition in the world. We are old and together. And this idea changed everything. In Paraguay, the indigenous, the los Guaraníes have an incredible system to intercambio, to exchange, named Yopoi. The Yopoi is a possibility to transfer something, but for the indigenous people, the reason for produce and for have a better economical condition is to complete the other. It's like a gift. It don't have the intention of a win-win trade or win-lose trade, traditional system in the Occidental countries, but they need to complete the other, because if the other is good, está bien, ¿cómo se dice? If the other is fine, I'm fine, and the other complete my life. And this time we talk about the urban rehabilitation and the possibility to how can in this moment when we think this is an urban planet, the urban rehabilitation is a very important thing, because we need to live in cities between us to complete us. But our very important work is not the urban rehabilitation, it's the human rehabilitation. Thank you very much. ¿Ah? ¿Cómo si no hablo? Hablo los ojos, muevo los brazos. A final picture, please. Can you applause again? Thank you.
Well, I think we're learning a lot about design coming in many, many shapes and scales. Our next speakers, and I guess you're going to speak together. Yeah, good. Luis Callejas, who is an architect of the National University of Medellin and design studio teacher at the Universidad Pontificia Bolivariana. I don't know why I have problems with that. No, in Medellin. And he has worked as in the artist architecture office of Luis Fernando Pelayas, I hope I said that right, and Hugo Zapata. He was part of the design team in charge of the architectonic and landscape renovation of the Botanical Garden in Medellin. And since 2007, together with Edgar Mazo and Sebastian Mejia, he manages the architecture and landscape studio Paisajes Emergentes, whatever, emerging. Emerging landscapes, exactly. They won the first prize in the international competition for the swimming pool complex for the Pan American Games. And And the studio also won the second prize in the 9th International Archine Competition, second place in the international competition Parque del Lago in Quito, Ecuador, and were finalists in the 2G international competition for the lake, is it Venice? Our second speaker or co-speaker is Mason White, who is a graduate of Virginia Tech and the Harvard GSD, where he did his MArch, with over 6 years of work experience. After completing his thesis, which was Transfixations, Film Space, he worked in New York City as an assistant editor and designer at Monticelli Press, architectural and art book publisher. And while in New York, he worked in the offices of Harari and Cohn Pedersen Fox. After receiving his MArch, he worked at Machado Silvetti in Boston before relocating to London, England. Mason is the 2001 recipient of the Alumni Traveling Fellowship from Virginia Tech. He also won the Architectural League of New York's Young Architects Award in 2005, and he received the Arthur Wheelwright Fellowship from Harvard from the GSD in 2008-2009, and most recently the Prix de Rome from the Canada Council for the Arts. Mason has taught or served as a visiting critic at Cornell, at Harvard, at Yale, Michigan. Frankly, there isn't an architecture school that he hasn't taught at, including the Architectural Association in London. And he's senior editor at archinet.com. His day job is assistant professor at the University of Toronto in the John H. Daniels Faculty of Architecture and Landscape Design. Please welcome Luis and Mason.
So thank you for the invitation. Maybe this one should be lateral landscapes. Yes. This is we're going to talk today about a collaboration between our two studios, one in Toronto, Canada, Mason's studio with Lola Shepard, and our studio in Medellin that it's me, Luis Callejas, and Edgar Mazo and Sebastián Mejía.
And first, I just wanted to say thank you, no doubt, to the team that's been assembling this amazing subject. We think it's a really important subject matter, but I think maybe more importantly is the questions of approach, how one would approach it. Also, I wanted to express my appreciation for all of those speaking today in their second language, giving presentations in their second language. I unfortunately only have one language. Maybe that's an excuse, but I've been very impressed just in watching today and yesterday, finding a way to present these topics and these issues in the search for language. I'm noticing a lot of the conversation is around issues of linguistics. So we thought it would be interesting to first reflect upon this idea of IIRSA as a country itself, maybe a country made up of, or a continent, I should say, made up of many different sub-countries, and to start to qualify the hub we've been looking at, which is the Andean hub, and the 4 or 5 countries that it intersects with, and to look at it comparatively across the different regions. So looking at population, GDP, energy, and transport, these are some of the approaches or the analytics by which IIRSA has been comparing the different hubs and the way they've been generating priorities, and that our hub, again, the Andean hub, is second in population, third in GDP, second in terms of the percentage of costs that IIRSA is putting forward within the hub. It will be going towards energy, and in our particular case, seventh, which is near the bottom, in terms of transport, which includes things like roadways, ports, airports, border stations. So So in a way, these are the numerical parameters by which the project originates, and massive quantities. Obviously, this is something that if there were such a thing as a NAP or an NAP, which would be an unfortunate name, but if there were, it probably would not carry the quantities of investment in infrastructure, as we've heard about issues in North America related to shovel-ready as being something that is maybe more a term than an actual action call. So our project we're looking at is combining these last two in some ways, this idea of energy and loosely speaking ideas of transportation into something that we're calling hydro borders.
This is something very important for us because we have all seen many maps of Latin America today, but for us, but mostly all of these visions are from the geographer point of view. And we are much more interested in something that is very hard to map and very hard to draw, and of course very hard to model, and is actually the weather in Latin America and climate events. So these things that are not static, that make this territory an always changing place, that is actually not a place, more like a phenomenon of always changing conditions that are basically, in this case, related to water. This map, for example, was actually very hard to find. And the most shocking thing about this is that this is from the 60s, from a Polish atlas, and was one of the first maps that was trying to represent the water in terms of rain in the world. What is interesting of this is that, well, basically you don't see any borders, you don't see, the geography is not that important. And what is important here is that we are located in this area with basically just a lot of water. This spot here is the rainiest area in the world. It's El Chocó, is the limits of our country with the Pacific. It has even more water than, for example, other parts of the world that are now completely basing their energetic infrastructure on water, like Norway. So basically, Colombia, that area, this area of Latin America, it's almost like a huge potential battery. We have a lot of water, but also we have a lot of mountains. This is very important because Brazil has also a lot of water and the areas in the south. But this mix between having lots of water and this very radical topography, of course, creates the perfect scenario for having a lot of hydroelectric exploitation. These maps are the same issues. What is interesting of this is that we always have to show different maps because this is something that changed very radically on the time. Actually, there is something very important about the Spanish that I would like to add, and is that in Spanish, time and weather means the same. It is usual, for example, to ask somebody how's the time and be asking at the same time how's the weather. So this always changing condition of the territory in Latin America is very interesting for the development of this research. More maps trying to interpret these models. And this is very interesting for us because we are architects and we are trained to do models, drawings that are very easy to relate to the models and the drawings that are made by the geographers. But when we move to try to represent or model things that are constantly changing or moving or are more fluid, it's of course more difficult. And of course, it's a lot more difficult to generate projects, physical projects or cities that have this capability to also react in a resilient way to this natural phenomenon. These are the Andes. This is very familiar for Latin Americans maybe, but this is very radical. This lots of difference between the levels of our mountains. So we started to create these maps. This is of course exaggerated. But this is the region that we are interested in. This is Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and for here is Chile, but it's not complete, of course. Brazil is here. So we all, these countries all share this condition of being all the time between this very radical topography. And all this was done in the 20th century. All this is hydroelectrical projects, dams basically, very big dams that were done and planned mostly between the early 20th century, 60s, some of them are very new. But the thing is that if you think when this infrastructure was planned, all this was planned a lot earlier than the map that I showed you that try to interpret the weather. So basically what happens is that Latin America is now a continent that is already capable of producing sustainable energy. For example, but it's really strange that, for example, Paraguay is the only country that is generating right now 100% of the energy that the country needs from hydroelectric plants. But for example, Colombia is around 60 to 70. Ecuador buys energy from Colombia. Venezuela buys energy from Colombia too. And what happens is that the network of hydroelectric plants is not connected. So in this case, for example, it's very different than the case of Europe, where, for example, the links between these hydroelectric plants is more, it's just already done. So 2 pictures in Colombia. This is also very familiar for a lot of people here, but maybe not for everybody. This is the desert in La Guajira. This is last year floodings. We had one of the worst times with floodings in our country, in Colombia. And what is interesting of this picture, I was visiting this place, and I was a little bit ignorant of what was happening here, but my immediate reaction was to think that these turbines were there to power this village. And the truth is that these turbines are there this is an experimental plant that was done close to a coal mine area, but this village didn't have any electricity the day that we came there. So this is the first part of our project, and maybe the biggest. But an initial thought, the thing that we're having now, is how to think of a possible relationship between all these hydroelectric plants. How can they possibly be linked in a future? But of course that means power lines, but power lines also mean crossing a lot of diverse ecosystems.
So the image that Luis showed really suggests 2 kinds of projects. One that maybe operates the way the geology and topography of the region already operates, which is in a north-south axis. And then second to that, a much smaller scale, which maybe is connecting up with existing hydroelectric plants. But then also these blue lines suggest a new typology or a new hydroelectric station typology that we wanted to explore in a charrette style for this presentation, thinking that the project really has two modes of operation. One is a exercise, I think, similar to other presenters, where we would use it as a vehicle for a studio at the University of Toronto, and then 2 as a longer-term project that we would explore as independent practices operating within it. So we will show, let's say, some speculation within that. First of all, this idea of a power border. And we've seen some presentations before about borders. I think here what we wanted to emphasize was that the Andes itself is an engine, is a kind of generator already in place. You've seen some photographs we've shown earlier, and those that are familiar with the region know that the Andes, due to its steep topography and due to the water network, already has a force to be reckoned with in terms of the kind of energy it can produce. So maybe the project is more about harnessing that kind of power. So the stock taking of the IIRSA portfolio yielded 10 border stations. This is what they asked for, literally. 10 border stations, 3 power plants, 2 airports, 34 roadways, etc. And what we were looking for when we just laid out the facts that they delivered to us of their investment was any possible synergetic connections amongst the investments they would already be putting forward. So we found this idea of the 10 border stations, of which 6 of them are included as part of their anchor projects. Maybe you heard some other presenters talk about that idea, where IIRSA has identified 31 anchor projects that will be about $4.3 billion investment across all of the hubs. So 6 of them are border stations within the Andean hub. And that's these points here. So Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru. So we were looking for possible intersections there, such as Venezuela, Colombia. Again, the proposal for a coal-fired power plant, which we will not work with. 3 border stations. It's this kind of green flag symbol here, and power connection projects. And so amongst these 3 borders, the consistent opportunities are a question of energy and some kind of gateway between the 2 regions, which is an interesting counterpoint to integration, which seemed to have been, I think someone had mentioned it earlier, this idea of a periphery, this idea of how the continent reflects outward economically. Maybe this is more opportunity about how it can stitch together economic opportunities to be catalytic within this north-south corridor. So again, these are the 3 border opportunities. And again, very, very small populations. These are not some of the borders that you saw earlier in the previous presentation, border cities. These are border villages or very small-scale developments. So it sets up an argument of integration to not be about lines connecting between, let's say, centers, crisscrossing across regions and complex ecologies, but more about reinforcing or stitching existing borders, because let's say the left ignores the fact that the borders already in place, which forms another complex network, is something that we have imposed, something that is not natural, let's say, to that context. It's always cutting across a river or cutting between mountain ranges. So, so these are examples of some of these borders. The entry into Ecuador. These are kind of accidental places or non-places. They're caught between identities. They're, again, like in many regions, maybe that's not so unique to this particular region. But what is very unique is that a high quantity of these borders are occurring where rivers meet. So the river and the border are the same line. So again, another example where the border and the river are the same. So down below a waterway, up above, 2 different political, economical contexts.
There's something very important here also, and it's that maybe the people that have been in these borders, especially between Colombia and Ecuador and Colombia and Venezuela, may know that these places are very strange places. These places are, of course, sometimes very problematic. Sometimes there is a lot of violence. Sometimes there is just a lot of political tension. And sometimes, and what happens every day in these places is that they are just not nice in terms of public experience. So these places seem to be the perfect opportunity to intensify the use of the public realm in the borders.
And this is a very quick, again, stock taking of border typologies, but roughly speaking, the kind of architectures or even urban form you might find there are accidental, informal, always dependent upon whatever microeconomy is happening within that region, and you get canopy types, shack types, sometimes market types, and then these miscellaneous unpredictable types. And so I think as an exercise, as a research exercise, the idea of quantifying or stock taking current border types would be interesting to complement the IIRSA portfolio. So we wanted to look at one case study.
I will go back to this image. The only thing in common that all this architecture, because this is basically very small scale, is that it's never nice. It's always really bad architecture, what happens in the borders. This is a case that we're interested in. It's something that happened in Colombia. Camilo was mentioning this briefly. And it's the story of this series or this network of dams in Colombia that is called Porce 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 is the construction basically stopped this year. It's in this area, and it's an hydroelectrical plant that it's supposed to work with the overflow of Porce 3. So what happened basically is that there were a lot of people here, from very diverse people that were living in this area. And what happened is that in an initial state, 1,700 families were living there, and just because of the rumors and the truth, the hydroelectrical plant was going to happen there, it ended up being 7,000 families. Basically, this happened because, of course, the government gives a lot of has to pay to the people that live there to buy the land and start this negotiation that can last 2 or 3 years. So now it's just impossible to negotiate with this huge amount of people. Some of them ended up there because of the guerrilla. They established this illegal, but also legal because they actually have the titles for the land for this area. So this is an opportunity instead of a problem, in the sense that we have enough people in Colombia to generate a city in 2 years that can, just because in this case of rumors and the reality of a power plant. So this is the situation that we want, or we hope that we can replicate in the borders between these countries.
Again, this idea that the border and the river network are synchronized, that they're geographically synchronized. Here's an example, again, between Colombia and Ecuador. So this dashed white line, well, I guess, yeah, it's dashed white line if you can identify it, runs synchronously with the river and then occasionally snaps across and picks up another river network and follows it, and then snaps across and follows another. And this is across, very small village types. You have population 10,000, 26,000. Again, I'm not to demean, but I'm setting it in contradistinction, or maybe playing up the idea of the hinterland condition as being a different kind of challenge than, let's say, I thought a fantastic project by Alexandra, the Sao Paulo water ring, river cleaning ring. And so this is a different type. Again, the pink circle identifying the border stations and, in some cases, the micro power stations that IIRSA has in their portfolio already. So we started calling these kind of zipper or a stitch. So something that could operate in a much smaller scale, a kind of micro scale, both in terms of energy, a micro scale in terms of economic opportunity, and even a micro scale in terms of cultural, social exchange between two countries. And I think that was really important to think that you could still affect the super line or the large scale, even through a series of aggregating very small projects. So I'd say this is maybe a reflection upon other kinds of development opportunities or approaches which are more wide scale and maybe aggregating within the same geography. Here maybe we're talking about acupunctural interventions. And these are rough, almost kind of quick ways to play out how difficult this scenario is, the kind of impossibility of trying to plan a hydroelectric micro border station type. What might it yield, and what kind of unfortunate, quick-witted, utopianist or maybe too nostalgic formal types might emerge. And then this is, again, just to be very transparent about the working process or the discussion process between Luis and I about the problem or the opportunity of this intervention type. We got really interested, again, to the zipper about the possibility of exchange across the border and across the waterline, either in terms of what might be manufactured or traded or exchanged here versus there. Even just that simple distance could be quite radical in terms of opportunities, in terms of economics, politics, etc. And the possibility of disaggregating hydroelectric. So, and we'll talk more about that technology. So this was an exploration of the zipper type to exchange across the borders. And now this issue of micro and macro. This is the Guri Dam in Venezuela. You might know, went through, it powers about 72% of the energy in Venezuela. Also experienced blackouts in 2010. So the challenges of the macro scale thinking in terms of, let's say, dependence or how it might be modulated or tuned to address to its needs. And then the small scale city problem, so the problem of planning, the problem of even form or urban form or settlement pattern within that, these challenges, I think, are part of this opportunity that we're identifying. Luis spoke a bit about this ironic twist between. Another quick example in Peru of an NGO called Practical Action that used something called micro hydropower, which they use something called a stream engine. And we were also looking at exploring that kind of technology. So here you see one such case where here the energy infrastructure is something that can be managed by the community rather than something that is, even the maintenance of it and the build out of it, even powering a sewing machine and a television. And back to our example type. So this is our charrette that we're showing. These are a series of a zipper type across between Colombia and Ecuador, looking at the stream engines deployed within the river, the possibility of exchange or trade at the border, the possibility of the generator to be a kind of public space, a new let's say, trade territory, and the exchange possibility between those.
There is something also very important about these drawings is that all of them are wrong in the sense that the river is always a line. So again, a river is not a place, a river is an event that is always changing. So of course the issue with dealing with something that changes all the time in the year is that you can't place traditional architecture or traditional ways of implanting a city right next to the river. So for us, there are three scales that are very important. One is what is floating actually in the water, in this case, the energy generation, not through big dams, but the small generators. But the interesting thing is how to transform this into a public experience. So how can actually people have some kind of activity there? Then, of course, the city is a little bit further, and we have to have infrastructure not as a way of containing the river for a natural disaster, because this disaster happens maybe once a year or once every 7 years. But all this time between the time that the disaster happens or the river flows, this infrastructure has to be able to sustain a public activity too. So it's also about how to transform containing infrastructure into a public experience.
And we're concluding here, I think, because we're out of time. So, and it's been a very long day. It's been a very patient audience. So I think that this image, maybe many of you have seen it before. It's a developmental biologist in the 1950s. It's a metaphor diagram by Conrad Waddington for a very simple idea, an idea about mutation, an idea about a response between a top surface, what he's calling a landscape, and then the epigenetic quality of it. This is where it serves as a metaphor, is that the strings or the kind of puppeteering of that landscape below is what alters the response to objects on top of it. And he uses the idea of a marble on top of this epigenetic landscape. And we see the possibility of micro-hydro, or the possibility of a smaller scale networked infrastructure, as offering not only connections back up to the landscape, but also connections to other tendrils or other kinds of cablings of that energy system. And I think we should end there. I think because thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was saying there's only 5 minutes left, and it's very late.
Yes.
I know.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much. Those were also 3 very engaging presentations, and now Yves will moderate this discussion.
Well, I want to thank you all very much for really stimulating projects. And I think that some really excellent examples of design thinking and how design thinking involves so many scales and is so multifactorial. And I think that it also is been a really interesting set of examples of what architectural and urban research really entails, and that it involves looking at climate and rainfall and all of these things at the same time as looking at how rivers move and affect architecture and settlements on their banks. And I think that actually what I would like to do, because we're sort of running short of time, is to ask the panelists if they have questions for each other, and then to open the discussion to the floor. So I guess I would start by just asking you if there are issues that you would like to raise with your co-panelists.
¿Cómo está Camilo?
You're right.
Well, I found really fascinating the issues that emerge in your country with the soy tips. So I'm very interested in knowing if there is actually something in development now.
Me preguntaron si es que estos proyectos los estamos desarrollando realmente ahora.
Sí.
¿Sí?
Sí, sí.
Sí. Sí. It's a particular situation because someday arrived to my office a group of indigenous and informers, and they told me, we need a vision for our territory. We need thinking about how can it's possible be better in our region. We need an architect, and we know you are an architect, and you can work with us. For me, this situation was amazing because it started an incredible process to involve relation with another kind of culture, another kind of intelligence, another kind of society, and that's this is one first moment. But crossing this first moment, I think the possibility to work with linked many other realidades. Fuerte decirlo, Camilo.
Realities.
many other realities with the help of many others facultades de arquitectura of South America. And with the cooperation of these faculties, we start a process to how can the people live in rebuilding the forest, and how can we imagine new conditions to develop and imagine how it's possible to have high density in the middle of the forest. It's possible today can plant today the material we need to build the city dentro inside 20 years. And all around these ideas, we have the privilege of relacionamiento,
relationship,
con todos los amigos. Even this opportunity of the SAP, it's an amazing opportunity because the problem is the same problem, have some quantity of some difference between what happened in the developed country and what happened in my particular country. But the possibility to imagine new compromises, to have a good society, to the people live together and give every time and make the completeness of the other, it's an amazing horizon for us. And with the help of the universidades, it's a great potential, because young people can imagine con facilidad, in an easy way, this kind of problems.
I think it was also interesting, Camilo, on your presentation where I think it cycles back to Eugenio's presentation at the very beginning related to the copper mining towns and that urban form. I'm thinking about an interesting contrast of extremes between, let's say, a hyper-local, in your case, and I think, Camilo, you're almost embracing a version of globalization that might actually have a local impact through the pharma park. And I think, just reflecting upon ours in collection with those, I think somewhere maybe a little bit between kind of maybe you know, a little bit of each, and maybe where it needs to reform itself or refine itself is I think the inevitability of economics always coming from corporations. You know, Santiago, in your presentation, you know, the flags that would appear on the different parcels of land, I think there's an inevitability about that, and I think it would be maybe too convenient to just deny or that would appear, not appear or not be a factor in the project. So I think based upon the previous panel discussion, it would be interesting to talk more about that idea, about the role of the economics, maybe whether it's cosmic or not cosmic, I don't know, but the role of the economics in the project as being the natural leveraging, you know, the thing that's going to make it happen, the actual engine behind it all, and IIRSA being maybe a powerful force that could also collect that. So I'm wondering, maybe Camilo, directing a question specifically to you, what is your take on it? Because I can't tell if there's a degree of humor in the pharma park, or to what degree there is a sincerity in it, relative to the corporate,
yeah,
you know, AstraZeneca and all that.
Oh, well, I think that, thank you for the question, and I do believe that you have to work with the flow of things. If you put some opposition straight and directly, as it used to be in the 20th century, nothing comes to a solution. But if you work with the energy that flows within it, I think you can create different atmospheres and different possibilities. For many pharmaceutical houses or companies, they need, in a way, this raw material that grows there. And I think it's more about bringing them to the situation that it's a win-win situation. And I take it really seriously. I know it sounds very utopic because it's millions and millions of dollars. But in a way, what it's on the table is how to get raw material for investigation and research that can be used to create a public benefit out of a private interest. And I think that's the key role that has to be accomplished in this century, because what's public and how we deal with the public is not only about being in somewhere or somehow in a place or a space. It's how we use all this force, that kind of inertia that has been developed about 200 years, almost 200 years since the Industrial Revolution, that it creates this power and this force for the private corporations to gain knowledge, in a way, to have the kind of they expand the I don't know what's the name in English of the octopuses tentacles. Yeah, but all these private companies, they develop quite strong tentacles, but you can make it work for you if you put the things in the right map and in the right frame. There is I have to use an example of Medellin, in a way, which is the public company for electric services, the EPM company. It's a public company, but it's run as a private company. This kind of lovely marriage between public and private has only given and created very strong social opportunities. So nowadays they have taken all the surplus that comes from the balance of the year and use it to give scholarships for kids. I'm not talking about pharmaceutical things at the moment, but the model of using the surplus of a company to create education will create sustainability in a way that the loop gets closed, in a way that everybody belongs to the system and respects it because can find a benefit out of it. Something that we don't usually see, or we don't link our public benefit with the private constitutions.
I just have one question for you about the cross-border investigation. I mean, how significant is the fact that these are cross-border investigations? Because you talk about natural landscape features or the rivers and so on, but the border in the sense of territoriality and political boundaries, how much is that a part of this project?
Well, first, there is something that is very important, and maybe it's not so evident for everybody, and is that in between these countries, usually the border is the river, always. Mm-hmm. So it's never, it's always a line that is crossed by this electricity infrastructure, but it's also something that has to be crossed in order to cross to other countries. So
probably also, just to reiterate what Luis is saying and what we were trying to convey in the presentation, is that the intersection, the crossing condition between a border and transport is a very natural phenomenon globally in terms of any form of settlement making or trade. So I think that was more intuitive than calculated. But also, just in trying to quantify or qualify the distinction amongst the different borders, it just emerged that there was no, there's no intentionality. The borders are let's say the conditions, architectural conditions of the border, whether it's bridge and building or whether it's just bridge or whatever it might be, there is no consideration put into those. And I think there's a new rating system for the borders, which is CBAF, Binacional de Atención de Frontera, kind of attention of the frontier binationally, or just to serve, border station. And that is encouraging trade, and I wouldn't say it qualifies exclusively as a free trade zone, but it's encouraging a smoother transaction between countries. So it seemed like a successful building type to explore.
But on the local scale, those connections are pretty fluid already. Is that right?
No.
Where they're...
No. No. Okay. So that seems like it's quite instrumental in that way.
But it was also something that was very, and I don't think, pressed for time and we ran out. I don't think we get a chance to emphasize what we wanted to emphasize. At the beginning, which we found very interesting in doing the research, is that I think each one of these hubs in IIRSA, they themselves are starting to generate an identity based upon their portfolio. So we saw our hub, the Andean hub, is kind of a hydrological border station identity. That was its identity, whereas obviously the Amazonas and the Bioceanic, they all have another identity, which maybe is to do with roadways or waterways. We saw ours just inherently in the portfolio as asking the question of how is the border crossed, and what do we do about energy disconnection, et cetera. So that was the identity of it.
Yeah.
For example, in 2008, 50% of the year, the border between Colombia and Ecuador was closed. And
that's really interesting. It seems to me that each one of these projects or hubs has its own logic, and that's very interesting. That you have the Amazonas logic, you have the Andean logic, and that sort of exploring those logics, or even recognizing them, and the layers of them is already really rethinking the whole geography. It seems to me.
Yeah, I think that I don't think that IIRSA could reflect upon their own portfolio as well as maybe, this is where I think architects or designers would have a power in this role, is to reflect upon it in terms of what the architectural or design opportunities are. It's not something they have the ability, they don't have the experience or the skill set, so it seems like a useful collaboration where they can figure out what their spreadsheets are. We need this many stations, this much energy, here's the disconnections, these are the red lines that we need to develop. And then how they should be developed or how there might be synergies amongst them seems like a successful collaboration for others.
Great. I think we should open it to the floor. Yeah.
Regarding the borders and your question, I think that, thank you. The one thing that has been only very tangentially addressed, but that has a huge impact in border management, and that Camilo mentioned, is narco-traffic. That is posing one of the greatest challenges to IIRSA, because the more fluid you make the borders, the more fluid you make the trade of illegal narcotics. And that's also creating a lot of problems in frontiers, like the one between Colombia, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Colombia, Peru. Because before, narco-traffic seemed to be largely, things have changed a lot in the last 10 years in South America. The geopolitics are just completely, they have completely shifted. The emergence of the Pacific, Colombia, Chile are two of the most important contemporary cultures. The Peruvian economy is growing at an amazing speed. Ecuador is doing pretty well, in spite of the fact that we have a complicated government. But one of the shifts that I noticed, specifically related to borders, is that just as Colombia has been incredibly successful in the last 10 years at fighting narco-traffic and pushing it out, it has spilled over, and now it's really a regional problem. Before, it seemed like a contained Colombian issue, and it was your war and it was your problem. Now it's not anymore. And I feel that one of the main obstacles to IIRSA is somehow addressing the flow of the illegal flow of narco-traffic. And the Amazon basin, as we flew down the river, it was pretty apparent that the Amazon basin is one of the main arteries for the flow of cocaine towards the Atlantic. So, you know, it's been mentioned, but I think that Ecuador now is, Correa opened the border completely with Colombia because of this integration ideology. So coming from an ideological perspective, it was great. But coming from a social political perspective, it has created huge problems because organized crime entered our country. And now Ecuadorians are trying to close the border again. So I think border is key. And two groups have touched upon that subject matter, and I appreciate it.
Well, I think that's true, but at the same time, all the social problems that are generated because of not having a fluid border, maybe they are more important than the problems that the drug traffic generates. So,
no, I wanted to add that we have to put things in the right place, and that means that borders only exist for Colombian Colombians. Really? No, really. It's true. I mean, when you speak about borders in Latin America, nobody has a problem or an issue with the border as long as it's not with Colombia. Yeah, really, and that for IIRSA map and for IIRSA infrastructure means a lot. Because then the illegality and this issue about illegal drug dealing, everything that lies beneath all this surface of integration has a different agenda. And the agenda that has to be put on the table is to legalize drugs. And what are we doing with drug dealing and the narco traffic? It's not in the official IIRSA agenda, but it lies beneath it. Because when you increase infrastructure for dealing the legal products, you increase the infrastructure for dealing with illegal products. So I think it's not about the ethical or morality thing, but I think it's a discussion that has to be placed in the right place, and let's deal with it. Because otherwise, all this integration, all that chit-chat that we are doing in a way about engineering is not going to be possible because the legal frame lies all around it.
Okay. Should we open it up to questions to the audience? Maybe we'll just take one or two because we do want to take a quick break and head on with a roundtable discussion. But no, I think maybe I think there's one quick question, and then I think we can move to the break.
Okay, more than a question is like this is a really strong topic, and I think it's the moment to destapar. I don't know, uncover. The real problem is not the narco traffic. It's not the coca. It's not the marijuana. It's an economical problem. The narco traffic is not the narco traffic by itself. It's a problem about the fluid of the capital in the world and the power in the world. So I think this is the main topic, the main point of the topic. And in the borders, there is what you said. It's like a strong point in the border between good and not good. So what is good for the people, for the world, for the population? To finish with our forest, or to fight about the economical interests. So I think it's really important to try to put the finger in the really strong topic that are the economical interests and the future of the nature. In my way of saying, I don't know.
Very good. I think with that comment we can perhaps end this session. Thank you very much to the panelists and the moderator. We will take a 5 to 10 minute break, and then we'll continue with the final roundtable discussion.
Thank you. Thank you.